The Roaring Twenties, the 19th Amendment, and the Flappers. The 19th Amendment and women's suffrage. The 19th Amendment was the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The Seneca Falls in 1848 was the first women's rights convention, marking the beginning of the organized women's rights movement in America. Elizabeth Cady Stanton presented a series of resolutions in her Declaration of Sentiments, but women's right to vote was not approved at the convention. In the 1917 march to White House, it was a peaceful march outside the White House for months. 13 women silently hold banners with words from Declaration of Independence. They are fined in court but refuse to pay their fines. They think to do so would admit guilt. Most of them were taken to jail, and they would go on hunger strikes and treated inhumanely, and they become interested in prison reform. The South supported the Prohibition Amendment, but did not support women's suffrage, at least in part, because it had potential to reopen the issue of racial discrimination in voting. Women's suffrage amendment, in white Southerners' eyes, not only raised the prospects of black women exercising the franchise, but also the possibility that federal officials would descend on the South to see Constitution was observed. The women who made it happen were Mrs. John Rogers, a descendant of a signer who signed the Declaration of Independence, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who began the fight in the mid-19th century and spent their lives fighting for women's rights, Carrie Chapman Cathead of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Alice Paul, a leader of the suffrage movement, she led marches to and motorcades to Washington to ask President Wilson for the right to vote, in which Woodrow Wilson approved the amendment on September 30th, 1918, and women's suffrage was proclaimed. It took over 60 years for the amendment to get ratified. The Flappers of the Roaring Twenties. Flappers were northern, urban, single, young, middle-class women. Many held steady jobs in the changing American economy. Women were needed on the sales floor to relate to the most precious customers, other women, but the flapper was not all work and no play. By night, flappers engaged in the active city nightlife. They frequented jazz clubs and vaudeville shows. Speakeasies were a common destination as the new woman of the 20s adopted the same carefree attitude toward prohibition as her male counterpart. With the political field leveled by the 19th Amendment, women sought to eliminate social double standards. The flapper had an unmistakable look. The long locks of Victorian women lay on the floors of beauty parlors as young women cut their hair to shoulder length. Hemlines of dresses rose dramatically to the knee. The cosmetics industry flowered as women used makeup in large numbers. Flappers bound their chests and wore high heels. Clara Bow, Hollywood's it girl, captured the flapper image for the nation to see. Many women celebrated the age of the flapper as a female declaration of independence. Experimentation with new looks, jobs, and lifestyles seemed liberating compared with the socially silenced women in the Victorian age. Smoking, drinking, and sexual experimentation were characteristics of the modern young woman. Despite the potential political and social gains or losses, the flappers of the 1920s sure managed to have a good time.